Welcome to the Holocaust Center for Humanities Lunch and Learn program. I'm Perry Dahl, the Community Engagement Senior Manager of the Holocaust Center. As people are logging on, please take a moment to let us know from where you are joining us in the chat. As we gather in the weeks leading up to International Holocaust Remembrance Day on January 27th, we want to share a few meaningful opportunities to continue reflection and engagement beyond today's program. Please join us on January 25th at the Seattle Repertory Theater for a special performance for International Holocaust Remembrance Day of the play Here There Are Blueberries, which is a powerful exploration of memory, evidence, and moral responsibility. Special pricing is available with the code Remembrance 25. Following the performance, stay for a brief talkback with Speakers Bureau member Carl Rohr, who will share his father's experience at Auschwitz. Looking ahead, from February 1st through March 15th, the Holocaust Center will present Art is Resistance, a collective art exhibit that with pieces that stand as testaments to courage, community, memory, and connection. At a time when reminders of our shared humanity matter more than ever, these programs affirm that remembrance is not only about the past, but about connection to the present and future through story, art, and community. It's my immense pleasure to introduce you all to Lorri Staal. Lorri is the Executive Director of Music of Remembrance and a member of the Holocaust Center for Humanities Speakers Bureau. Today, she'll be sharing the remarkable story of her father, Abraham A.B. Staal, who spent 2 years in hiding in the Netherlands during the Holocaust. Protected by members of the Dutch resistance, he survived thanks to the courage of 10 families who risked their lives to shelter him. Decades later, Lorri reconnected with the descendants of his rescuers and traveled to the Netherlands to honor their bravery. In this moving presentation, she will be sharing the experience of her father in hiding and paying tribute to those who chose humanity in the face of terror. We'll have time at the end of this presentation for questions. Please type in any of your questions at any point into the Q&A form on Zoom. Thank you so much for joining us today, Lorri. I'm passing it off to you.
For having me, everybody. Okay, I'm going to share. Can you see my screen? Perry, can you see my screen?
I sure can.
Okay, great. Okay. Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining today. My name's Lorri Staal, and before I tell you about my dad, I'm going to share a little bit about myself and my family. I grew up in New York. I'm Jewish. I'm also a lawyer and practiced corporate law for many years in Manhattan. And in 2020, in the middle of COVID, I moved to Seattle, and it was a great time to move across the country in the middle of COVID. As Perry mentioned, I'm now the Executive Director of Music of Remembrance, which is a performing arts group that focuses on a broad range of humanitarian issues. Just as a side note, these slides were prepared for presentations to primarily middle school kids, and I have not changed the slides in any way, just as a note. So my dad, Abraham Staal, grew up in the Netherlands, and my mother was Ermelo Staal, who grew up in Germany. They both have passed away. I have a younger brother, Levi, who lives in Chicago. So when I was a kid, I knew that my father lost his whole family in the Holocaust, and I knew that he was a hidden child. But that's really all I knew. Like many Holocaust survivors, he just did not want to talk about the past. It was just too painful for him. But in 1998, when I was already 36 years old, my dad gave an interview to the Shoah Project, which is Steven Spielberg's project to collect oral histories about the Holocaust. And when I watched the interview of my dad, I learned about his family and what happened to him and his family during the war, but I still did not know much about the people who saved him. That changed in 2016. Except I can't move the screen. Okay. Okay, here we go. Sorry about that. So in 2016, I was at work sitting at my desk doing whatever corporate lawyers do when I got an email out of the blue from someone who I didn't know. His name was Andre Sira. And the email said, "You don't know me, but my grandparents hid your father and his family during the war in Ermelo in the Netherlands." And I almost fell off my chair because this was just enough information for me to know that the email was legit. After that, Dr. Sira and I traded a lot of emails. We had phone calls and Zoom calls, and he connected me with local Dutch researchers. They sent me articles and historical information. They even found my dad's report card. I'm happy to tell you, it was very good. But some of the local articles actually mentioned my father and his family and what happened to them. And every time I found someone who knew about what happened to my father, I reached out to them. Why? Obviously, I wanted to know what happened to my dad during the war, but also I wanted to find these people and thank them for what they did and their bravery, because after all, I literally wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for them. So after a few months of back and forth with Dr. Sira and others in the Netherlands, I just decided I had to meet everybody. So in 2016, my daughter Hannah and I went to the Netherlands, and we met with researchers and some of the people who helped save my father. And I'll tell you about some of those other people in a few minutes. Here you see us sitting and having lunch in the town square in Ermelo. We traded research, we traded information, and we also did some fun things in Amsterdam, like bike around. So now I'm going to tell you about my dad. He was born in 1928 in Amsterdam. He had a younger brother, Japja, and a younger sister, Becha. His parents, my grandparents, were Elizabeth and Lorri Staal. As we go through the story, I'm going to play excerpts from his interview with the Shoah Project from 1998. In the upper right, you see a picture of my dad. I'm guessing he was 10 or 11 at the time. And below that is a picture of his grandparents' antique store. The building's still there. It's on the Rokin in Amsterdam, and now it's a hotel called Hotel des Arts.
I grew up in Amsterdam.
No audio.
I was.
Is it playing?
I grew up
Hang on,
in
please.
Amsterdam.
I have a problem.
I was born in.
Yep.
On weekends.
The audio is playing for us.
Oh, it is? Okay. Sorry. Just back. Okay. Give me the thumbs up if here.
I grew up
The audio?
in Amsterdam. I was born in Amsterdam op de Nieuwe Herengracht in 1928, where I lived with my family. And my parents had a small business there. And I have many recollections that we had. Both my parents worked.
So you heard my dad mention the Nieuwe Herengracht. That's a canal in Amsterdam, and it actually is in the middle of the Jewish quarter where most Jews in Amsterdam lived before the war.
I grew up on weekends, we could stay one weekend with my mother's mother. That was the Rokin where we stayed, and we had a great time there always. I helped out with the carpenter who did the repair on the antique furniture, and my grandmother always had a special closet for us that I remember with the toys in there where we played. And I know there was even swings in the attic where we went up there and we could play up there. And on holidays I would go with the carpenter up to the top floor to hang out the flag for the national holidays. And I always was very amazed when this huge flagpole, as I remember it, that he would stick out of the window and hang the flag.
So in a lot of ways, my dad had a normal, happy childhood. In 1933, Hitler came to power at a time when Germany was still reeling from its defeat in World War I. So the Nazis believed that Aryans were the master race and that Jews were inferior. But I want to emphasize all the different ways and the forms that anti-Semitism takes. Stereotypes about Jews controlling banks and the media, online harassment, vandalism like swastikas on buildings, physical attacks like the shootings that occurred recently in Sydney, Holocaust denial, discrimination in the workplace. The list goes on. And anti-Semitism is at the highest level that it's been at for many years. In 1941, let me go back. Germany invaded the Netherlands on May 10th, 1940. This is a picture of Rotterdam after it was bombed out. The Netherlands surrendered just 5 days after the invasion on May 15th, 1940. My dad was 12 years old at the time. In 1941, the Netherlands started to pass restrictive laws against Jews. They weren't allowed to go to parks, to libraries, to the beach. They couldn't travel. They obviously could not leave the country. And by 1942, just 2 years after the invasion, they were required to wear yellow stars on the outside of their clothing so that they could be very easily identified. For a while, my dad was not aware of the war. After all, he was just 12 years old.
I didn't know what war was. I know it was very dangerous, but I really didn't know. Maybe I'd heard about concentration camps, but I doubt it. No.
Get him off, because I can't hear it. Sorry. I need some help. Go back.
I didn't know what war was. I know it was very dangerous, but I really didn't know. Maybe I'd heard about concentration camps, but I doubt it. Nobody really knew about concentration camps. There were rumors, but there was no factual information that anybody had. I never saw the Germans marching. I'm not really aware of the German. All I know is at some point there were Germans, and the conversation at home was, we'd have no concern. The Dutch Jews, they don't want Dutch Jews. The Germans are not concerned about the Dutch Jews. I didn't know what war was. I know it was.
So what was happening with my father's family? In 1941, as the freedom of the Jews became more and more restricted, Amsterdam became more and more dangerous. So the family decided to move to Ermelo, a rural town about an hour outside of Amsterdam. They thought it would be safer there. When they got to Ermelo, they connected with a postmaster there, whose name was Anton Roque. He was active in the resistance and was friendly to the Jews. On the right, you see a picture of Anton and his wife, Bernardina. The Roque family lived in the second story of the post office in town. And in the middle of the screen, you see a picture of the house where they first moved to. When my dad's family first moved to Ermelo, they lived out in the open. And in front of the house, you see a picture of myself and Anton Roque's son, who's also named Anton. When my dad was 13, he had to leave the home that he grew up in. He had to leave the city he knew. He had to leave his cousins, his aunts, and his uncles, and move to a rural town and started a new school. Interestingly, the police chief in Ermelo was friendly towards the Jews and told the family that the kids should not wear Jewish stars when they went to school, and so they didn't. When he started at school, my dad became friends with the postmaster's son, Anton. They had play dates, they went to each other's homes, and they became really good friends. In 1942, the roundup started in the Netherlands, and Dutch Jews started to be arrested by the Nazis. Many were taken to a transit camp called Westerbork, and then sent to concentration camps like Auschwitz and Sobibor. In the summer of 1942, things became so bad that my dad's family decided they had to go underground and into hiding. They rented a farmhouse that belonged to Frederick and Sophia Kaiser. The name of the farmhouse was Bremenden. You see a picture of it on the right. In hiding with my dad were his parents, his brother and sister, and his maternal grandmother, Lorri Staal, Morpurgo. The farmhouse was a weekend house for the Kaiser family. Their full-time residence was in Utrecht, which is about an hour away from Ermelo.
We got the official call to report for labor to a camp or some central point where we had to come with the family with belongings, and I don't really know what the details were because we weren't told by my parents what it was. But my parents had found a preacher who was willing to rent us his house, which was in the Ermelo area, in the woods, completely away from the town. And that's where we moved with the whole family. Someday, you know, we moved there at night and we lived there day and night and never came out of the house. We lived all as a family inside the house. The preacher lived in Utrecht somewhere. He would come some weekends, he would join us, but most of the time we were strictly alone.
So just to paint the picture a little bit, the house had to look empty because no one was supposed to know that there was a Jewish family staying there. So they couldn't open the windows. They couldn't have a fire in the fireplace because the smoke would give them away. The kids couldn't go outside. They had to stay quiet all day and all night. And so just imagine 3 kids, 10, 12, and 14, all keeping quiet day after day, never going outside, having no friends visit, obviously no TV, cell phones, or video games, and very little food. And speaking of food, for some reason, it was my dad's job to get food for the family. And so from time to time at night in the dark, he would take a bike and bike across fields of heather 45 minutes to the small town of Ermelo, where he would meet with a friendly grocer who would give him small rations for the family. And then my dad would bike back with just the moonlight to guide him through the fields 45 minutes with the food. It was very scary for him, and it was a lot of pressure. So the slide about Anne Frank is included because students learn about Anne Frank in school, and her story gives them a reference point. Anne was about the same age as my dad. She was a year younger. And in Amsterdam, she lived about a mile away from my dad's childhood home. And they were in hiding at the same time. So my dad's family lived at the farmhouse for about 9 months. And one day they heard a bell ringing, a bell that was attached to the gate of the house. And this was a problem because the bell was there as a warning that someone was approaching the house. But no one was supposed to be approaching the house because no one was supposed to know that the family was there. It turned out that someone had tipped off the NSB. Those were the Nazi sympathizing police, and they were in the town of Putten next to Ermelo. Ermelo was sympathetic to the Jews, and Putten was not. So the NSB went out of their legal jurisdiction to hunt down my dad's family.
There was a knock on the door. My mother yelled something out. I heard everybody yell. The preacher was there that day, also with his wife. So the house was filled with our family, my grandparents, my brothers and sisters, my parents, the preacher and his wife, and my grandmother, and Mr. Hirsch. I don't know whether there was anybody else. I don't think so. And we all scrambled when we realized that they were coming in to arrest us. I don't know what prompted me, but I went into the wing of the house underneath the bed. I hid under the bed. And I remember that the preacher's wife was sitting on top of the bed because I could see her legs sitting down, and she must have been aware that I was in the bed, under the bed. And I could hear screaming, I hear consternation. I didn't, it's all vague what happened on that day. But I do remember all of a sudden I see a flash of light underneath the bed and somebody saying, "Come out with your hands up." So I don't know whether this is probably the wrong thing to say, but I don't know whether the preacher's wife pointed to me. I don't know why they went directly to the bed underneath where she was sitting. But I came out, I put my hands in my neck, and somebody with a light behind me walked me outside to go from the wing into the kitchen, which was centrally located, where the whole family was being gathered. At that point in time, I decided to make a run for it. And I jumped. I jumped down the garden. I heard a lot of yelling, come back. I kept running. I went through. I know that I jumped with my legs into a ditch. I was soaking wet. I ran like crazy, I guess is the expression, because I was sure they were following me. I went over barbed wire in the direction of Mr. Arts' house, which is in Ermelo, one of the contact men from the underground.
So after the arrest, the family was put on a train. It was headed to Westerbork and then to Sobibor. Mr. Rook, the postman, learned about the arrest and he was very worried. He decided to try and find my dad's family. So he pretended he was from the Red Cross. He made up an armband to make it look like it was part of the Red Cross. He went on to the train when it was in Ermelo. He found my dad's parents and he was able to tell them that my dad was safe. My father's mother took a scrap of toilet paper and wrote a note on it. It said, "Dear A.B., we are very proud of your flight. We think always of you and don't forget us. Many happy returns on your birthday. Your father, your mother, Betty, and yeah." My father's birthday was 3 days later. He was 15 and he never saw his family again. My dad kept that scrap of paper his whole life. So my father was suddenly by himself at 15 in the woods, in the snow. And after a few hours, when he was sure that no one was following him, he went to the home of someone he knew was in the resistance. And that was the first of about 10 families who hit him.
Were they aware that you were Jewish?
All the time, of course. It evolved, the network that was established was really specializing in Jewish children. I wasn't aware of it at that time, but that network was pretty sophisticated, and I don't know where the headquarters was, I think in Utrecht somewhere, but it was consolidated and it was pretty centralized, and names of people willing to take in Jewish children, you know, were known, and they were transported.
So my dad hid in about 3 towns that were all either in or near Ermelo. And I'm going to tell you about some of the rescuers so that I can pay tribute to their courage and their generosity in helping my dad. When my dad first got to the Arts family, they discussed what should happen with my dad. And it was decided that it was just too dangerous for my dad to stay there. They were worried that someone had followed him to the house. And in fact, they were so worried that Mr. Arts decided that he needed to go underground in order to protect his family. My dad was brought to the Elsgeest family, and their business was printing, and they actually printed documents for the resistance. And so that was a risky business, and therefore they were concerned about my dad staying with them as well. This whole time, Mr. Roque, the postman, was aware of where my dad was, and I believe he was sort of orchestrating the path of my father. So he decided that my dad needed to go to the post office and stay with the Roque family for a while. So Mr. Roque had one of his postmen, Arie Vandenberg, pick up my dad in his mail delivery tricycle, put my dad in a pouch, covered him with canvas, and brought him in that way to the post office. My dad stayed in the room of his good friend Anton. During the day, he was under the bed most of the time. And at night, Anton shared his dinner with my dad and brought him food. Keep in mind that Anton was also 15, and he was not allowed to talk to anyone about the fact that my dad was there. So he couldn't tell his brother or his sister. He certainly couldn't tell his friends or anyone else. It's a lot of pressure for someone who's just a teenager. But after the Nazis took over the post office, my dad had to leave and move somewhere else. He was taken to the home of Mrs. Alst Decker, who showed him great kindness.
There was a sister of Mr. Roque, the postmaster, Mrs. Alst Decker. She ran a cigar store, and I stayed with her. She would tuck me in at night. And she would make me comfortable. She would make me sit outside on the balcony and put carpeting on the balcony so nobody would see me and I could get fresh air. And she would cook for me all kinds of delicious desserts. And she really motherly type and did a wonderful job. And I actually visited her after the war, in which I saw before she passed away, and thanked her for what she had done.
So because the house was in the middle of town, it also was too dangerous for my dad to stay there for very long. The last family that he stayed with was the Brink family. They had 10 children of their own. The father was a carpenter. My dad was there for about 9 months, and Mr. Brink was able to show my dad some carpentry skills, which he used his whole life. So I want to say that most of the families who helped my father were very kind, but some of them really were not at all. But the bottom line is that they all took great risk by taking in my dad and helping a Jewish boy who they didn't know. Amsterdam was liberated by Canadian forces on May 5th, 1945, almost exactly 5 years after the Nazis invaded. And when the war ended, my father's aunt, who was living in New York at the time, sent a telegram to Ermelo asking about the whereabouts of my dad and his family. And Mr. Roque, the postmaster, was able to let my dad's aunt and uncle know that he was okay. The day the war ended for my father was the day that Canadian soldiers arrived.
Everybody ran to the highway, which was maybe 4 blocks away. I was the last to arrive because I couldn't walk. My legs swelled up. I had to sit on it was too weak to run. I had never walked that far in probably in a year's time. My legs couldn't support me. I felt my legs swell up, my muscles hurt. I had to sit down on the stone and rest. Finally, I remember going to the road. It was very emotional.
What did you see?
I don't remember tanks. Canadian soldiers coming. That was a big moment that they came in. Everybody waving with orange flags. That was the House of Orange. That was the flag of the Netherlands.
So what happened to my father's family? When they were arrested, they were sent to Westerbork and then to Sobibor, a concentration camp in eastern Poland, right on the Ukrainian border. My dad's family arrived there on March 30th, and they were all murdered 3 days later on April 2nd, 1943. In all, about 167,000 people were killed at Sobibor. In 1940, before the war, there were about 140,000 Jews living in the Netherlands. After the war, just 35,000. The Nazis had murdered 75% of the Jewish population. About 2 years after the end of the war, my dad was able to leave the Netherlands to join his aunt and uncle in Queens. He took a boat called the Leerdam and went to New York. And this is his legacy. He met my mom in New York. They got married in 1960. In the middle is a picture of my mother and her family, her parents and her sister's kids. That's me in the middle in the white dress. And there are pictures of my dad with my son, Ben, and my daughter, Hannah. And here are pictures of more family, his first cousins, Jack and Valerie. And bottom left is a picture of my brother and his family. And there are pictures of our kids and my husband, Steve. So after my trip to Ermelo and after meeting the people who helped save my father, I truly wanted to find a way to honor them. And the best tribute I could think of was through Yad Vashem, the Holocaust Memorial Museum in Israel. Yad Vashem honors non-Jews who saved Jewish lives during the Holocaust with an award called Righteous Among the Nations. So in the fall of 2016, after I had gone to Amsterdam and Ermelo, I collected all the photographs and articles and emails that I had collected, and I prepared a 15-page single-spaced application and submitted it to Yad Vashem, and it was successful. In 2022, Yad Vashem honored 9 individuals who helped save my father. The ceremony was held in Ermelo at a small museum there. And at this ceremony were 100 relatives of rescuers. They came from 10 countries including Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, England, Switzerland, the Netherlands, the US, and more. So here you see a photo of the honorees accepting the awards. There's Ari Vandenberg, whose grandfather took my dad in the mail tricycle. In the middle is Ben Roque. He's one of the postmaster's sons. And on the right is Dr. Andre Sira, who first reached out to me in early 2016 and whose grandparents had the farmhouse where my dad's family was in hiding. So going back to 1943 for a moment, when the family was arrested, it happened that the owners of the farmhouse, the Kaisers, were at the house as well by coincidence. They also were sent to prison in Putin, and they happened to be released a couple days later. But when they got to the farmhouse, they found it in shambles. Everything had been ransacked. A lot of things had been stolen, but on the ground in the corner underneath some rubble was a small crystal candlestick. And it had belonged to my father's grandmother, Betja Staal-Morperko. She used it for Shabbat and other Jewish holidays. Mrs. Kaiser took the candlestick, safeguarded it through the war, gave it to her daughter, who gave it to her daughter. The candlestick was safeguarded for 70 years by 3 generations of family members. And it was given to me in 2016 when I was there. And the note that accompanied the candlestick said, "My mother would be happy to know we could return it to the rightful owner." So this is a tangible object that my great-grandmother, who I never knew, held and used in Jewish holidays. And now I use it in my own holidays. And every time I do, I think of my dad's family and of the people who saved him. Here are my dad's thoughts about the people who saved him.
The tragedy of making people aware through these videotapes what has happened to Jews, I think omits one aspect of life that's hopeful. The people that saved us. The few people that went out there to risk their personal lives and the lives of their families to save one Jew they kept in their house. They risked their lives. They had the moral values and rectitude to stand up to danger, to expose their own safety, to save a human being.
You know, I have to tell you that I'm amazed to think of my father's gratitude and his optimism and his faith in humanity after everything that he went through. But indeed, there is yet another very hopeful postscript to this story. Just last year, the town of Ermelo contacted me out of the blue. They had formed a group called Working Group on Jewish Victims. And at their own initiative, this group built a large interactive sign honoring my father's story. And here's a picture or two of the sign. It's located at Bremenden, which is where the farmhouse was, where my dad was in hiding with his family. The Dutch text on the sign tells a brief accounting of the story of the arrest and my dad's escape. There are levers on the side, and on the levers are the names of my dad's family. And when you press one down, up pops a picture of that family member. So if you press the one that has my dad's parents' names on it, up pops their picture, which you can see on the left-hand side. On the sign is a crank, and when it is turned, you hear a snippet of my dad's interview through the Show Up Project.
But I do remember all of a sudden I see a flash of light underneath the bed and somebody saying, "Come out."
I have to tell you, this is incredibly moving to me because you hear my dad's actual voice, telling the actual story of his escape in the actual woods where it happened. And I think this is just an incredible monument to his family and his story, and I'm really deeply humbled by it. Also at the farmhouse, the town installed stumblestones, or Stolpersteine. There's a stone for each member of my father's family who was in hiding. These stones are the size of about a brick. They have bronze at the top, and they're all over Europe. There are over 100,000 in 30 European countries, and they're installed in front of the house where a Jewish family lived right before they were arrested. I was actually able to be in Ermelo for the installation, which was incredibly moving. So when I think about my father's story and my own journey, I think about how important it is to be an upstander, to speak up, to take action, to take bold risks if necessary, to protect someone who's being victimized or persecuted. But the fact that there's so many good and courageous people who helped my father during the war, and the fact that the people in Ermelo are so very proud of the legacy and the courage of their ancestors, and the fact that the town to this day continues to honor that legacy gives me a lot of hope and a lot of inspiration. And before I turn this over to a Q&A, I just want to say that in honor of International Holocaust Remembrance Day, Music of Remembrance is going to have a very special concert on January 26th. It's free. It's at Benaroya Hall, and I hope you'll join us. Go to the website to get information about tickets. So thank you very much.
Thank you so very much, Lorri. Wow, what a deeply, deeply moving presentation. Thank you again. As a reminder, if you have any questions, please put them in the Q&A. And I can also start us off. Lorri, I'm curious about, so the timeline is your father hadn't talked about his Holocaust experience and then the show of footage came out. Is that correct? So
Right.
So what
I was going
changed
to
in your
say,
relationship with your father after the Shoah Foundation footage came out?
I have to say, not very much, because he still didn't want to talk to me about it. I mean, we had a very good relationship. It just, I guess there's a difference between talking to a third person versus someone in your inner circle. And frankly, to be honest, I wish I had pursued that more. I wish I had pushed it a little bit more and asked him those questions. But we were all very protective of him his whole life and kind of knew that we weren't supposed to ask those difficult questions. And that's probably why I didn't push it.
How do you talk to your children about this story?
I think the best way for me to communicate it was by taking them to Holland and taking them to Ermelo, having them meet some of the people who saved my dad, by reminding them of this story so that my dad and his ancestors are not forgotten, and to continue to honor the people who saved my father, because this is, that kind of courage is needed today. But I must say that it was emphasized to me over and over again when I was in Ermelo that these people did not consider themselves heroes. They considered that the way they looked at it was they were just doing what anyone should be doing in their life.
Do you know how that first family was able to find you and track you down in 2016? There was a question in the comments about how you got connected to the folks in the underground.
You can thank Dr. Google. So what happened was Dr. Sierra's family was sitting in Switzerland one day, and they were aware of my father, but they didn't know what happened to him. And to make a long story short, Dr. Sira's daughter happened to be in the United States, and they were aware of the Shoah Foundation project, but you can't watch those videos unless you have permission, but you can go to USC or the Holocaust Museum in DC and watch those videos. So Dr. Sira's daughter, Tanya, went to the Holocaust Center at USC. She sat for 4 hours and watched the video. And at the end, my dad proudly said, and my daughter's a lawyer in New York. And so then she Googled me, and in 2 seconds, they found me at work, which is why I got that surprise email at work.
Curious about that shift in your work, and I'm wondering about how your father's story influences the work that you do at Music of Remembrance.
I think that, well, to be honest, I think that this journey was a big influence because I really am filled with gratitude, and I'm really much more in touch with my dad's story and the need to keep telling it and the need to keep honoring other people who face persecution, because as we know, there's no shortage of communities that are facing incredible hardship. And it wasn't a conscious decision, but looking back, I have to think I mean, I was involved in that journey from 2016 through 2024. And so it was a big part of my life, and it must have had an influence in why I searched for something that had a lot of meaning, and it was a way for me to give back to the community.
Thank you so much, Lorri. There are a couple more questions in the Q&A. First, folks want to know how they can get tickets to the 26th, the performance on the 26th. So if you have a link to that, you can put it in the chat as well, or we can also send it post facto. Also, there is a question: did your father ever visit Canada or in any way acknowledge the role played by Canada in his liberation?
That is a good question. Not that I'm aware of. I don't think that he went to Canada for that purpose. We all went to Canada. We went to Ermelo together in about 1995. And we went to Ermelo with my dad, and he looked for the house that where he was hidden, and he couldn't find it. And we went up and down those heather fields where he rode his bike to get food. And it was very frustrating to him, but of course, you know, it was a memory from decades before that. And it was not until I went with the people who actually saved him, and they took me to that farmhouse, that I was able to find it.
Wow. The last question is, what was your father's occupation as an adult?
He was a stockbroker. But I think I want to say that after the war, he was very active working with children. He worked at the Henry Street Settlement House, as did my mother. Like I said during the presentation, I just can't believe the sense of optimism and sort of generosity that he had. He worked with children his whole life, underprivileged children. And he just never lost the ability to hope that there was, you know, a better life for other people who didn't have the resources that he was able to develop.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks everyone for joining.
Thank you again, Lorri, for being such a wonderful part of this program and for the work that you do, both for the Holocaust Center and in your wonderful work with Music of Remembrance. These Lunch and Learn programs are fueled by all of you, your participation, your questions and comments, and your desire to learn. We have some excellent upcoming programming in 2026, including our next Lunch and Learn in February, all about AI and Holocaust memory with Professor Victoria Grace Richardson Walden. Again, thank you to the Gladys Foundation for supporting our Lunch and Learn programming. And thank you to all of our staff at the Holocaust Center for helping to make this program possible, especially our dear Cameron Zorb, who is running the tech behind the scenes today. Thank you, Cameron. And thank you to all of you for your curiosity and desire to learn. We look forward to seeing you later in 2026. This concludes our programming for today. And I will also share that the code Remembrance 25 is not the code for our upcoming performance of Here There Blueberries. It is Remembrance Day. Cameron has put that into the chat for you all. And if we can get that code from you, Lorri, the link to your performance on the 26th, and we'll send that out to you all as well. So thank you all very much.